Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson, and welcome to another session of Construction Business Management. I think you're going to get a bit of a enjoyment out of this lecture. It's on leadership, and it's one that I always enjoy doing. Leadership versus management, and sort of identifying what's the difference and how can I best manage my employees. If you're going to run a construction business, you better be thinking about this. We've spent a fair bit of time in previous sessions on engagement, retention, hiring, training, motivation. And so I just wanted to bring up this final one on leadership versus management and leading your business and some of the nuanced differences between them. I find that when I ask this question live in class, a lot of people have troubles. What's the difference between management and leadership? It's all the same thing. Well, there are some significant differences. There are some overlaps, to be sure, but there's some significant differences between management and leadership. And so I want you to think about this. If you're starting a business, it's going to be really important, and it's going to be a catalyst to pull all of the things that we've talked about in the many videos that we've done in this course and start to thread the needle to pull things together, kind of weaving all these elements together. And if we do it right, we're going to have a well-oiled machine as a business that's really going to become like a flywheel, generating a lot of positive aspects in a lot of different ways. And I don't mean only money, but money would be part of it. So if we think about leadership as we come full circle, as I mentioned, as it grows, it's going to be even more complicated to be able to lead a group of people. It's easy enough if you're a small business and you're one person, you're leading yourself. It becomes another thing when you're leading 2 people, 5 people, 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. It becomes quite a lot more complicated. Trying to get this big engine of a business going in the right direction and going at a good velocity. It's why a lot of younger companies that are a little bit more nimble and quick are able to outmaneuver some of the more established businesses. And very often that's how some of the more established businesses find themselves all of a sudden behind the 8 ball, because they haven't been able to adjust. They haven't been agile enough with the changes that have been going on in the marketplace. A really effective leader is able to really sort of direct that team in a certain direction. Not that they come up with all the ideas, but that they're able to pull things together and formulate it in a certain direction. Very important for a business to be successful. So we're going to consider some of those things. And if we think about what are the attributes and skills of a great leader, you can start thinking about, well, what are they? What does a great leader need to be able to do? And one of the things that we talked about early in the course, they have a really good way of seeing into the future. They have a vision of where things are going. If you have a project, and I do this topic if I'm doing a site management course, if I'm doing a project management course. If you're a project manager, you're leading that project. You're a site manager, you're leading that on-site team. So you have to really have a good vision of where you're taking things. And that's an element of a great leader. You have to be passionate about what you're doing as well. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, other people, how do you expect to get other people passionate? Usually great leaders have a real verve or energy level in them that really comes out very, very quickly. You also have to have really good communication skills. It doesn't mean that you have to be a really good orator, meaning a speaker in front of a lot of people, but you really have to be able to talk to people, and they really have to get you. They really have to understand what you're trying to do. And if they feel that you have this energy, they'll pick up on the nuances of the language. But you do have to be able to communicate well to others. And what you're communicating, everybody's not going to agree with it. That's the other thing. When you lead projects, when you lead project teams, when you lead businesses, not everybody is on board. And sometimes the train has to leave the station without some people. That's just the way it tends to work. But at the same time, as a leader, you have to have the courage to pick the direction and move in that direction. If you don't have the courage to do it, then you're going to be a laggard. And in business, if you're a laggard, that's not a good thing because you're always trying to play catch up. So you want to try to be a leader in your sector from that perspective. You have to be inquisitive. You have to ask lots of questions, and the ability to ask questions and listen is really important. So to be a good leader, you have to ask a lot of questions and be curious. Be curious. Don't be disinterested. Don't think that you know everything. Don't be humble about. You have to be humble about things when you're trying to position yourself as a great leader in that perspective. You're not thinking, I've got to be a great leader. I've got to be a great leader. You're just doing these principles, and then that will eventually come across with a number of challenges that you'll run into, and how well you and your team handle those challenges will be important. And of course, great leaders are goal-oriented. And we spent a lot of time in earlier sessions on the goals aspect. And we looked at SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, all of those elements. You can go back and check some of those videos under the playlist, the Construction Business Management playlist on my YouTube channel, and get a good sense of those aspects. But it's got to be challenging. You're a leader. You gotta get people to challenge themselves, to engage in the work, to be motivated about it, and you have to be able to keep your cool under certain situations. If you're flying off the handle all the time, people pick up on that as well, and they don't exactly like leaders that are flying off the handle all the time. They want somebody that is much more consistent and stable in their practices. Also, a great leader really engages with their team and wants them to succeed, wants them to get better. It's not, I have so many stories I couldn't tell you on this, but one time I was doing it was Construct Canada. It was many years ago, and after I had spoken there, one of the contractors came up to me, and they wanted to hire some students because they knew I was a college professor, etc. And that, when you do these things, that happens a lot. And I can still remember this person. They seemed okay, okay. And then all of a sudden, they were saying, oh, well, they have a lot of new immigrants that they've been hiring and this and that. And I said, okay, great. We've got even courses on English as a second language, and that could be helpful for them to get better at what they do. And he looked at me, why would I want them to get better at what they do? I would just want them to basically dig ditches or whatever it was. I don't want them to get better. I don't want them to learn those things because they're going to leave me. See, that would never be a great leader. That's an awful person to work for, and that's very limiting, right? So I took the card and I never did anything with it after that. But I mean, if you really want to be successful in running a business, again, you've got to have other people's best interests at heart, not just your own. So we're talking about great leaders. We're not talking about lousy leaders or average leaders here. So we're talking about great leaders. So think about the desire to help others succeed as well as being a very important element of being a great leader. Now, none of us is perfect on these, right? There's a lot of these that we can work on as humans. Everybody's different. There might be some of you that have a lot of courage and you have no problem telling somebody, even though you know that they might have trouble. That's not your issue. For some people, it would be. Maybe your issue is the communication side, speaking and getting a point across and verbalizing it. All of these things can be worked on, though. Some people have different talents, natural talents in different areas, but then if you work on your weaknesses or you really have strong talents in certain areas, they may be able to compensate for those other areas that you have some more challenges with. And I think it's not a bad thing in the years that I've been teaching leadership in various courses for you to look at somebody that you admire. You can look through history, you could look at Abraham Lincoln, you could look at Martin Luther King, you could look at Mother Teresa, you could look at Gandhi, you can look at quite a few figures, Nelson Mandela through history, and you can look at some of their strong attributes. The other thing, though, I do warn you, with every leader, there's always some things that probably some people didn't like. Usually, if you're the energy and you're at the center of things, you can pick any leader you want today, and there'll be a bunch of fans, and then there will be some naysayers. So that comes kind of part and parcel with it. One that I happen to like for a variety of reasons historically is Winston Churchill. And again, I know there is a lot of things in his history that certain people, especially from certain cultures, might not appreciate. But if I look at him for what he did, accomplished during World War II and leading up to World War II, and from where he was, there's a lot of things that really fell into place with a lot of effort on his part. It wasn't just this, people will say, natural thing, but I always go back to this presentation he had to do in Parliament in his early days. And I might have said this in an earlier video because I like to repeat things sometimes, but young Winston Churchill was around 23 or 24, and he was elected to Parliament. Maybe it was 25, and he had to give a speech, and he forgot the words and messed it all up. So it was all messed up. Couldn't come across with it. Well, what did he do? He basically flustered, went and sat down, didn't finish the speech, and the next day the newspaper said this young Winston Churchill's mentally inept. And, he was kind of devastated by it at the time. And we all know how some of us have trouble speaking in front of groups, especially if you haven't practiced at it. And so he vowed at that point that wasn't going to happen to him again, and he worked it, and he worked it, and he worked it, and he got better and better. And every time he had a speech, he wrote it himself, and he bounced words off people, and he'd go for the most simple, straight way of saying something. If a word was too complex, he'd look at simplifying it and work it and work it and work it. And so by the time he gave those 6 speeches in 1939, when England was basically ready to cave in to Germany, and he was able to rally the whole country together. And really, we might have been living in a different world had that not have happened. So I look at somebody that's had those events and failed. And he not only failed at that, he failed at Gallipoli. He was a bit of an imperialist. He had a number of failings that he had through his life, but he definitely worked at it. And I also admire that he worked at the aspect of making things somewhat effortless in how he proceeded with things. He had certain things that would make things easier for him to be able to take on all of the stress and things that he had to take on in those positions. So there was a lot of positive elements that came out of that. So I would say for you, think of somebody that you find admirable, but understand, like I said, every leader, there's always some things. People are human that way, but look at that and look at the positive traits and skills and what you might be able to self-reflect on and where you have your weaknesses and how you can build on them. I think if we don't make a conscious effort on things, then things just slide away, and then we just say, I'm not good at leadership, or I'm not good at this sort of thing. And then you're really into what we call a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset. So those are some of the things. Great leaders, in my mind, have a growth mindset. They are forward-looking, they are optimistic of the future, and they do believe that they can have an impact on what they're doing. So those are some of those elements. I like to compare it with management because people have trouble understanding, well, so what's the difference with a manager then, between a leader? Well, this book written by Warren Bennis on becoming a leader. Excellent book. Warren Bennis, renowned researcher in the area of leadership for decades and decades. So he had this, it's really kind of just this play on words. maybe it's a little bit negative on the manager side, because if you're only a manager, you would only do the management things. But the great thing is managers can be leaders, right? If they take on that role. Otherwise, they're kind of just administering while the leader's innovating. Well, in today's world, it is important to administer. Believe me, it's important to administer. But at the same time, you do want to continuously improve. And to continuously improve, you need to innovate. Managers a copy. Well, if you're kind of an innovator, you're going to be an original, right? You're not going to just be a copier. Managers kind of like status quo. So this is the way we've done it, and I'm going to continue to do this, and this is fine. The leader's into developing their people, like we talked about earlier in the course, and developing the business. Manager focuses on systems and structure. Systems are important. We've talked about systems. We talked about goals, we've talked about visions, and we talked about systems. Systems allow us to do things more easily and effortlessly, right? And repeatedly. But the leader focuses on people because they're going to help us get it done, and they're going to help us problem solve, and they're going to help us with the more complex, deep work issues and relationships. The manager relies on control. The leader inspires trust. Well, especially some managers who might be just, very sort of micro in their thinking, but leaders inspire trust. And if you inspire trust, then people tend to stay late without being asked to stay late, and go that extra mile without being asked to go that extra mile. Manager has a short-range view. The leader has a long-term perspective. Not that there's anything wrong with a short-range view. You do have to keep that. Site supers on project have a more short-range view. Project managers on construction projects have a more long-range view. They better overlap and they better work them well together to be successful. But a business owner needs not only the short range, but the long range view, because there is a lot of changes. As I started out the course, most of my clients were like Kodak and Kmart and Blockbuster. Where are they now, right? So these businesses didn't see the long range. Or if they did, they didn't act on it. They didn't innovate with it. Manager asks how and when. The leader asks what and why. Nothing wrong with asking how and when, but why is a very fundamentally important question. If you're not sure about what I mean by that, look up the 5 whys. I've talked about that in other courses. It's a lean tool to get at the root cause of things. And so leaders really want to know the root cause so they can go forward long range with a better action plan than just fixing things for now, right? How and when is more the workaround to fix things now. What? Well, if somebody has come to a certain conclusion about something and you're a leader and you're listening to them, it's a very effective tool to say, what led you to that conclusion? So that person really might go back and explain how they came to that decision, or how they came to that decision. What led them to that decision? That can be very, very helpful for a leader to ask that, because maybe that individual will second guess themselves, and then you can discuss it further and keep asking why to find the root cause. The manager has his or her eye always on the bottom line. The leader's eye is on the horizon. This has sunk a lot of businesses and publicly traded businesses. We talked about the difference between a small business and a publicly traded business. Publicly traded business is on a stock exchange as an example. And if it's on a stock exchange, they have reports that they have to do, quarterly reports. And they give projections. There's very short-term projections. And if the stockholders or the shareholders think it's negative in the short term, they start selling the shares and the share price goes down. So very often managers in a publicly traded company and leaders in a publicly traded company will make short-term decisions to try to boost the stock. But that may be the wrong choice if it sinks the business in 5 years. we're going to keep making film and we're doing all of this. We're not going to make this big investment in digital because it's going to help our bottom line right now. Well, that time that went by, now you can't get that time back, and others have surpassed you, and you're not nimble enough to catch up. The business is over. That's how things can go on that way. So it's not just the current bottom line, it's also looking to the future and what the steps are involved to get there. It goes back again earlier in the course. I hope you're starting to see how this whole course is threading together all these different parts, because it really is important from that perspective. You know, some parts that we talked about last video I did was on regulatory authority. It's not the most thrilling lecture. I try to keep it, you know, reasonably short because people can always look this information up. But it's still important, and it's still how a business needs to structure itself with those things. But then there's other parts that are like this that are much more interconnected with the whole operation of the business. The manager imitates, the leader originates. Very similar to innovates, right? Manager accepts the status quo, the leader challenges it. That's the continuous improvement aspect, lean thinking. Manager is the classic good soldier, the leader is his or her own person. They are their own person. Manager does things, I like this one, the manager does things right, the leader does the right thing, right? So the manager does things right, the leader does the right thing. You pick, so manager does the, we are making the, I'm not picking on Kodak all the time, but just because we did so much work for them, they were a great company. Make this beautiful film, great, fantastic, the best film on the planet, developed the best way, but at a certain point, nobody wants film. Everybody's using this, right? Nobody, so what? You make the best film. Nobody wants it anymore. It's going back to the early 1900s. We make the best horse and buggy on the planet. Great, but nobody wants it after about 1905. Everybody wants a car. And so whatever business you're in, it was just going away to nothing. So you could have been doing it right, but you're not doing the right thing. You didn't have the vision for where to go. You went down the wrong path, and you kept going down the wrong path. Difference between a manager and a leader, right there. So if you're having trouble before this, hopefully that's helping to clarify it. I thought Benez did a fantastic job on that list. So really what I'm saying is these points here, right? How they all intertwine. Managers in blue, leaders in green. I'm not taking away that you don't need management skills. You do. I'm just distinguishing the difference here. And indeed, some great leaders, you know what? They're not that great on the administrative side. Like this administrative ability, it's not their thing. But they are smart enough to know that and to delegate it to managers that are much better at that than they are. So that those kind of things you got to consider as well. Somebody has to be good at administrative ability. Otherwise, you know, you would have very poor processes and systems in your organization. You know, maybe you've lost access to getting online with your IT department, and you can't get them to get you back online. There's very poor processes and systems that are in place. So those are some of the, you know, just examples that you might think of that way. So Aon Hewitt is a large research business, and they've actually done a ton of work globally with many businesses, but many of the large construction businesses have utilized their expertise, and they have a bunch of points that they think about when they're talking about careers and managing people, etc. And I think this 50 best research that they did a while back on, you know, if your manager, the person you report to, provides you look at the color coding: managing performance, career development, and recognition. This is going back to the people and culture, human resource part of this course that we did a few lectures back. Provides the support I need to succeed, sets clear expectations and goals with me, right? Very important for managing performance. Effectively deals with poor performance on our team, doesn't let things slide, holds people accountable, takes actions to support my health and well-being where appropriate. You want to build loyalty, you want to build retention. Somebody is having a hard time, you support them during that hard time, and you've won a fan for life as a business owner and manager. Don't forget that one. Understands my job well enough to evaluate my performance. Maybe a better way to phrase that: cares about your job well enough to be able to evaluate your performance. Has taken the time to understand it, because you have to understand every manager doesn't really know the nuances of the job that you do all that well. In construction, I would say it's a little bit better than most industries, but still. Does an excellent job of addressing employee questions or concerns. These are important to manage performance. Career development, right, and recognition. So career development provides regular feedback to help you get better. Works with you to find ways to develop and grow in your job. Displays integrity and ethical conduct at all times. That's also the element of a great leader. If you're not displaying integrity and ethical conduct yourself, you've just, you've created a business that is going to have certain people want to leave, and the ones that stay are probably of like minds like you, and it's not going to be good for anybody. So displays integrity and ethic. You want to make sure of that. Very, very fundamentally important. Inspires me to do my best work every day. Takes the time to let me know my efforts are appreciated. And that means a lot to people. That does mean a lot to people. Make sure that we take the time to celebrate our successes. And they really encourage regular one-on-one meetings frequently. Not once a year for a performance review, but very, very frequently. Kind of depends how many employees you have reporting to you. I know when I was directing at George Brown, I had about 75 employees at one point, and it was just that's really not a good situation where you got one manager that has 75 people reporting to them, but it does occur. You really do have to make sure that you are keeping that communication process. Otherwise, they're really a stranger to you, and when they see you, it's a performance review. Come on, that's not going to get people really engaged in their work. So that's why their research has pointed to the importance of those aspects, because it is important. It's common sense in a lot of ways to be following through with these elements. And again, you can see how these points interconnect with the different things that we've been discussing in the course. So that's what I wanted to cover in today's video lecture. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I do. I find this topic fascinating. It is an area that there's a lot of subjective elements to it, but there's enough work and research by companies like Aon and many others, McKinsey Group, etc., that kind of gives a good element or layout of where you can build your strengths from, and this can help to form the culture and the type of business that people would want to work for and that you would want to run. And if you follow that sort of premise along with the other areas that we've been discussing in the course, I think it's going to lead you to be much more successful with your business and your career. So if you enjoyed this video, please click subscribe. Go to the playlist on my YouTube channel and look for Construction Business Management so you can catch up on the other videos in the course. And that's what I really wanted to cover today. And don't be afraid to put comments. Maybe you've had your own experiences that you've come across with good leaders that you want to put a comment down the YouTube channel. That's always makes things more interesting for other viewers as well. Then we can start to really sort of have some good discussions going on in the comments section. I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.